Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Great Shot Kid, the Nerd Party Network's podcast that looks at the creative and technical influences and works of Star Wars creators. I'm John.
And I'm Mike.
And this week we have a chock full of goodness for you this week. But just a quick reminder that you can find the show, as always, at thenerdparty.com/greatshotkid. If you want to contact us, thenerdparty.com/contact. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/thenerdparty. And the network Twitter handle is @joinnerdparty. And we're the Nerd Party over on Instagram with the hashtag GreatShotKid. So with all of that out of the way, Mike, we have a rip-roaring good show to get into. As promised, later in the show, we will begin our chapter-by-chapter analysis of Alan Dean Foster's 1978 classic Splinter of the Mind's Eye, the very first instance of Star Wars Expanded Universe writing ever. And first, we're going to talk, as many others have and many others will, of a little bit of news that that came out during my hiatus here, that we have a new director for episode 9, and what it means and what it indicates for our esteemed franchise that we all know and love so well. And of course, that director is JJ Abrams.
Yeah.
So, Mike, give me your first reaction. Take us back. You read the news. What's your first reaction?
My first reaction was a little bit of surprise that it wasn't Rian Johnson, because I didn't see the story where, they said that he passed, but passed on the project, that is.
Yes. He's still with us, folks.
He is still with us.
Yes.
But, I guess my first reaction was, oh, all right, because I'm a big fan of JJ, and, slightly after that, it was like, kind of disappointing they didn't get someone new, but if you're not going to get someone new, that's pretty much the best person you could get. I think that he is the best living director of Star Wars out there.
That's a bold claim, because Mr. Lucas is still with us, so I think he still deserves that title. But hey, that's all our opinions.
I think Abrams is a better director.
I disagree.
Okay.
I disagree.
I'm sure most people disagree, but we can definitely
not necessarily. There are plenty of people who would side with you, and there are people who would side with me, and that's fine. Is he the best director that's currently working in the Star Wars franchise as it exists today, owned by Disney, and Lucas has retired? Probably, yeah. I'd give him that one. Sure.
Rian Johnson is certainly up there,
Yeah,
but and here's the thing. I guess you could even say that maybe I like. Well, I don't even know if I would say that I like George Lucas's movies better than J.J. Abrams' movies, to be honest. But
I can honestly answer that one too.
Yeah, I know. But I guess the thing is, it's like, I don't think that J.J. Abrams could create the Star Wars universe. But I've always thought, and I think a lot of people think, I think he thinks, to be honest, I think George Lucas thinks this, that when it comes to direction, he knows when to delegate. This is, I think, why Empire and Jedi are so great. It's because he's like, I'm going to let someone who maybe has a stronger skill set in that area take care of that. Even if he is going to be pulling the strings behind the scenes, it's like, is he the best person to write a script? Maybe not. Is he the best person to direct? Maybe not. But can he assemble a team and come up with ideas and fuel these other people's creativity? Yeah.
Okay, fine. That word ideas, though, is the one that really trips me up in the conversation here, where we're talking, Lucas versus Abrams. And keep in mind, I'm an Abrams fan. I came around on The Force Awakens. I enjoy The Force Awakens. I really love The Force Awakens. But it's that ideas thing that still trips me up a bit, because Mission Impossible 3 is a really good movie. I would say it's probably, the most impressive debut somebody could have outside of, when you're talking the auteur filmmakers like Spielberg and Lucas and stuff like that. I think that's a really well put together film and all of those things. But it's Abrams's ideas are not usually the most original out there. I would say that's probably a fair point. I mean, Super 8 is a very touching movie for the majority of it, but it's really a capitulation of Spielberg's influence on his life and filmmaking and storytelling. And Mission Impossible 3 is essentially, this is a movie series that's based on a TV series, which is basically fairly roughed out for you from the beginning. Force Awakens, if there's a knock against it, is that some of the ideas there weren't the freshest in the entire saga. And so, that's where I would rather see a director who maybe doesn't get the best performances out of a cast, but has an endless font of ideas, than somebody who gets great performances out of a cast, but the movies sometimes feel a little bit stale around the edges. That exact same criticism can be extended towards Spielberg, who is a terrific director in his own right. And this is purely in the context of whether I prefer Lucas or Abrams. And, and for me, I also, I'm highly tuned, I guess, to the visual aesthetic of Lucas. I prefer Lucas's visual aesthetic to many other people out there. So that's just me.
And that's, one of the strongest points I have in Abrams's favor is, his visual aesthetic completely lines up with my own personal tastes. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's like when I think of action blockbuster filmmaking, when I think of, seeing something, opening weekend on the big screen and CinemaScope and being completely blown away by, sort of like the energy and the visuals and everything, the editing, everything like that, which is on display. I think of Abrams, I think of his work on... But
doesn't that speak right back to what you were saying about, Lucas can assemble a team, and Abrams assembles a team too. These people make him look terrific. I'd say that, if you give Abrams an edge, it's because he does get really energetic performances from his cast and only hires people that can run really fast. Whereas Lucas is much more of a shot composition and editing type of guy.
No, I definitely think that's true, but I think the difference there is that in a lot of ways, I think Lucas is more hands-off in that regard, where Abrams is specifically hiring people in order to get his vision on the screen, his exact vision on the screen. Whereas I think Lucas, I know this is going to sound weird talking about Lucas, but he actually lets go a bit. He lets people do their own thing, and then once he sees what they've done, then he'll step in. I'm just thinking about the situation with Jedi, for example, or even with Empire. It's he wasn't on set for those movies. We've read the making of Empire Strikes Back, where you see them improvising dialogue on set, and it's once it gets back and once it's edited, he's okay, we need to change things, but he's not there. And even, in the case of, some of these things like Jedi or Red Tails or whatever, he actually goes in and does the reshoots himself or whatever, whatever it is.
Okay, see, the thing is, this is a whole separate... This goes down into a whole other rabbit hole, because if you have read Making of Empire Strikes Back, you find out that Kirshner was actually falling so far behind that second unit wound up taking a ton of stuff off of his plate. Mm-hmm. So there's almost like a co-director status going on there, because there was a lot of second unit stuff that had to be brought in. But then, of course, it sounds like I'm sitting there and bashing on Kirshner, which I'm not, because it was still his team putting things together and his look and his flow and all of those sorts of things. So I mean, the thing is, I think that's just like, that's a whole big thing there. I cannot disagree with you that Abrams is a great director. He really and truly is. I find it intriguing. I thought he would get involved to be the person to wade in and sell the idea to somebody to work for Lucasfilm. To say, listen, I'm JJ Abrams. Everybody loves me, and I loved working here. I can get you, come on, we'll get you the right deal. I promise you're not going to get fired. You got the JJ Abrams word here. I didn't think that he would be the guy to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they do need to get someone who's a big name, in order to do episode 9 of Star Wars. And, just his reasonings for not doing episode 8 and everything, the idea of, I mean, the reasons why he turned down episode 7 in the first place, just the idea of not wanting to, leave the country, leave his family for, like a year or whatever. That's what made me think. And also, I mean, he hasn't made a movie since episode 7. I really thought that he was going to do something smaller. There was talk of that book. I forget what the book was now, but like...
Oh, I know the one. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the book, but yeah,
like
there was a book.
Was going to produce it and maybe star in it.
Yeah.
And,
why can't I remember the name? Hey, if anybody out there can remember it, go to @JoinNerdParty on Twitter and #GreatShotKid. Let us know what that was.
Like, I really thought that he would do the Nolan thing, and do something small and then maybe go back and do another big blockbuster, not Star Wars. But that surprised me. I mean, I've got to think that they were like, here's $15 million, not exaggerating on that at all, right? If not more. Go, we're desperate. We need you desperately, here. You'll never have to work again for the rest of your life after this. You know what I mean?
Well, what's really super interesting to me about it is, again, getting back to what, people have now fallen back to beating up. Everybody loves to pretend like The Force Awakens was not extremely well received and a lot of people loved it. It was, and they did. And there were some knocks on it about, oh, you're just regurgitating this. And so, the soft reboot is what has struck a lot of people in hindsight as what they didn't like. What I find really intriguing about the situation is two things. One, he becomes the first director besides Lucas to direct more than one Star Wars film. Mm-hmm. And two, he's finishing Rian Johnson's story. So with episode 7, he's restarting Lucas's. And then with episode 9, he's finishing Rian Johnson's.
Is it really though, or is it more?
It is because Rian Johnson said they had no real roadmap. That he came in, and we've talked about this, where he came in and they said, yeah, do it, whatever, sure, write a script, and he did, and they thought it was great, and they've talked on and on about how great they thought the script was and everything like that, and so in a sense, Abrams has to wrap up everything that Johnson sets up.
But Johnson had to basically do the same thing. Like, he needs to follow Abrams' lead as well. And, I mean, I don't think that Abrams necessarily has a problem with that, because if you read the press, when episode 7 was coming out, and they're like, oh, episode 8, Rian Johnson, he's like, I'm looking at what Johnson is doing, and I kind of wish that I was doing it because it's so cool. So right. He's definitely down with whatever Johnson is doing in episode 8,
Right. I'm just saying it speaks, I guess, to your point about I thought he would do something a little more personal in between. Mm-hmm. This is essentially, I think, indicative very much of the era that we're in with filmmaking in general, of it being more of almost a TV production mindset.
Yeah.
And since Abrams comes from a TV background, I don't think that's a bad thing for him. I think of the big name directors, he's a good guy to slot in to do the next episode, fittingly called an episode, but do the next episode of a series.
Yeah, although at this point, I think he's pretty much graduated to showrunner status when it comes to these movies. You know what I mean? He's going to do right. He's going to do episode 7, which is the pilot. Maybe he'll come back for the big finale, but he really does. kind of treat his career like he does a television, like a showrunner does. You know, the idea of like you start something up and then you move on to the next thing. I mean, that's how you're pushed in a business sense. You know, I mean, I was just listening to the 50-year mission book on the Audible, and you know, Ira Stephen Bear is on there talking about how, you know, ever since season 4 on, basically as soon as he became an executive producer and ran Deep Space Nine for a year, his agent was trying to convince him to leave and do something else because he wasn't benefiting from it career-wise, you know. And that's kind of like the philosophy. I know that things have changed a bit in terms of like, you know, these sort of like auteur-driven shows, but, you know, that's for your Mad Men and your, you know, Breaking Bads. That's not for your, you know, Legends of Tomorrow and, you know, Gifteds or whatever. You know what I mean?
I do. I mean, the thing that will strike me as strange is that I'm endlessly curious about the visual aesthetic, about will it feel jarring to go from Abrams, which, I mean, Episode 7 looks beautiful. It really does. It's a gorgeous film. And then you go to Episode 8, and I'm familiar with Johnson's aesthetic, as you are, and seeing how that plays into it, and then snapping back. I don't see Abrams changing his style in a substantial way. So it's almost like we revert. There's no, like, at least with, say, for instance, Jedi. I mean, even with the prequels, like Lucas refined his style and moved things forward. What is it about? Can we expect any change from Abrams? Can we expect him to adapt or try something different, or is it? And this sounds dismissive, and it's not intended to be, but do we already know what it's going to look like? Basically, do we already know how this film looks and feels?
I think the lurking variable there is that these are all Star Wars episode films, and that is going to be a much greater influence than any other individual filmmaker's style. So while Episode 7 is definitely a JJ Abrams movie, it's also JJ Abrams doing Star Wars, you know? And I imagine that that's what Episode 8 is going to be as well. So while you have that change from one director to the other, you also have that through line of the Star Wars aesthetic. And I think that that's going to be consistent across the board. That's going to lend itself to consistency. So, yeah.
Well, here's an interesting question then for you, because the variable we haven't talked about yet is Kasdan is not coming back. Kasdan looks like the Han Solo movie is it for him. And so Chris Terrio comes on board to co-write this with Abrams.
It's an interesting choice.
What do you think that does?
I think it's an interesting choice. I really do.
He's not known for light and funny things like movies with Ewoks in them.
Argo is a pretty damn funny movie.
Argo finds its humor from some pretty tense situations. And yes, Alan Arkin and John Goodman are flat out hysterical. But that's not, I mean, hey, if he brought that type of humor to a Star Wars movie, that would truly be groundbreaking.
But I mean, okay, despite my ongoing trailer embargo, I have seen a couple of trailers for Justice League, because I saw one in 70 millimeter, and I'm like, I want to see what this looks like in 70 millimeter. It might be my only chance. So I watched the trailer, and there's definitely humor in that. I mean, I think the trailer that I saw was pre-Joss. So, you know, there's definitely an effort to lighten up the tone of Batman versus Superman, and really that's all he's written. Like, that's it, right? I mean, Argo, Batman versus Superman,
Argo. See, the thing is bringing Terrio in, especially because of him having written Argo. Still, there's that burning fire in me that wants to kidnap Michael Arndt and just not do anything bad, but like ply him with alcohol and fine foods and say, why don't you come back and write something? He worked with Lucas for a while for the on the development of what was going to be episode 7, the mysterious episode 7 none of us know. Why wouldn't you bring back Arndt? Why wouldn't you bring him back into the fold? He's already there, and he's already, he's tapped that wellspring, as it were.
I think Michael Arndt coming back, even if you want him to. He's I think he's been wronged by Lucasfilm. I don't know. That's just my guess. I don't know. Maybe who knows how these things work, but it sounds like basically he worked on it for a while and then they threw out all of his stuff and started from scratch, right? So,
he still got a credit on episode 7.
Sure, yeah.
A teeny credit, but a credit.
I guess you gotta think of it in this case. It's not like at least the way that it's sounding, the way that it's being credited, the way that it's being announced and everything, it doesn't sound like they've brought on Terrio to like write the script and then JJ is rewriting it. It doesn't sound like that's what's happening. It sounds like Terrio is Abrams' writing partner. And what's the reason behind that? It could be, and going back to our theory that they had to really scramble and maybe throw out everything that they had once, Carrie Fisher passed away. Like maybe, obviously they were desperate, right? You're desperate to get this thing off the ground.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they were taking pitches from every writer in town. And maybe it was Terrio who came to them and said, here's how we hack this Gibson. And they're like, that's a good idea. Now we need to get a director on board. And once they got JJ on board, JJ being a writer himself and everything is like, okay, I like your idea, Chris Terrio. Now let's write this together. You know what I mean?
It just needs another Star Killer base.
Maybe that's all it needs.
Sorry, lame joke. Easy grab. Had to go for it. I couldn't resist.
But Terrio, he is a good writer. It's a dangerous. I guess they're relying on the fact that most people don't care who writes these things, right? Because
most people have no idea who writes these things.
So it's not like people are going to be like, "Oh my God!" From the writer of Batman versus Superman, ew. Most people aren't going to say that. Most people aren't going to notice it. Obviously, you're going to get people who are going to say that, but like. To me, Batman versus Superman, for one thing, is not that bad of a movie. I actually enjoy it.
We'll be discussing it here on Great Shot Kid at some point in the future, I'm sure.
We will be, and I'm current. If you go to commentarytrackstars.com, God willing, our 3-hour commentary for that will be up by the time you hear this. Cross your fingers.
I'm hoping that it is up because I will need something playing in the background while I watch that film.
But Argo. He won a freaking Oscar for Argo. Okay,
deservedly so. Argo is a fantastically written picture.
Yeah,
it is wonderful from top to bottom. It sings. It's one of those things where the casting and direction just made it better. You could actually see where it started on the page and why it worked so well. There were so many elements in that were just great from the beginning.
Yeah.
And a real tribute to screenwriting.
And I'm really looking forward to Justice League as well, I have to say. I don't have any reason to think that movie is going to be bad because just like JJ, Zack Snyder is a really good director, if you ask me. Like, I think maybe sometimes his material isn't the best, but no one shoots a movie like Zack Snyder. His movies are gorgeous.
He leaves a visual imprint that is unmistakable, and that may sound like a backhanded compliment, but that's always been the most frustrating thing for me about Snyder, is that I find him to but rarely live up to what I see him capable of. I want to see material that matches. And you know what? You might disagree with me on this, but 300, I do love 300. I thought 300 was was a really well-made film, and I really enjoyed it from top to bottom. And I have a pleasant memory of seeing that with my brother in the theater and digging the whole thing. But then I also have the memory of seeing his remake of Dawn of the Dead and sticking with it for about the first third, and then looking at my friend Joey, because we were both fans of the original Dawn of the Dead, and looking at him saying, it's losing me, man. This isn't quite matching up, and then flaming out at the end. I mean, that's sort of the story of Zack Snyder for me, is I might see something and be like, hey, that's pretty good. And then I see something, that's not good at all. That didn't work for me. And Watchmen was a big whiff for me. It looked great, but it just didn't click.
I think the only Snyder movie that I haven't liked is the Owl movie, Legends of the Guardians or whatever, Legends of the Owls.
Oh,
Legends
yeah, I didn't make it more than like 10 minutes into that.
Yeah, that movie was bad. But I think, I love Dawn of the Dead. I thought 300 was fine. It was kind of dumb, but whatever. But visually speaking, what I mean, I don't just mean his movies look beautiful, but they do. But I mean that he's a really good visual storyteller. Like, you can turn off the sound, watch the movies, and, get these stories, whether they're good or bad stories, you know exactly what he's saying visually. I mean, I remember seeing Sucker Punch, which I know everyone hates, and I think it's probably...
Never seen it, actually, because everybody's reviews of it were so negative that I just didn't bother.
Everyone hates it. I don't know. I think it's really, really good, to be honest. It might be his best movie, in my opinion, and I definitely see the criticisms. Okay, fine. But it's really that visual storytelling, which I think is astounding, and there's a lot of weird things in terms of dreams within dreams and blah, 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 and the way that they, these things progress. And I mean, the sort of expanse of technique which is used throughout is really, really impressive, and some of the best action sequences you'll ever see, some of the best use of music you'll ever see, in action sequences. I know everyone's probably going to be like, you're insane, Mike, you're insane. That's fine, whatever, you can say that. I'm cool with that. I like...
He co-hosts 2 shows with me weekly. He's used to somebody calling him insane on a pretty regular basis. Trust me.
I'm going to say it right here. If Matt Rushing can say that Batman versus Superman is Zack Snyder's best movie, I can say that Sucker Punch is Zack Snyder's best movie.
You heard it here first, folks, in our
go.
discussion about storytelling and technique. But I promise everybody that we will, in the future, be discussing Batman versus Superman here on Great Shot Kid, something I never in my life thought would happen. I never thought that there would be an excuse to force me to watch that movie again.
It's the wild, wild west here at Lucasfilm. You never know who's going to start working on a Star Wars movie. So,
the Boba Fett movie, directed by David Lynch. I'm hoping.
Oh, yeah.
I got I can hope it now.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
But speaking of storytelling, let's get to one of our ongoing bits here, which is going to be going into Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster. So everybody put on your reading hats and your reading glasses and pull up a nice glass of whatever you like to drink, and welcome to our reading corner here on Great Shot Kid. Now, just as a reminder, we're doing this chapter-by-chapter analysis inspired by another show here on the Nerd Party called Owl Post, which looks at the Harry Potter series chapter by chapter. It's a very popular show, and it really seems to ring a bell for the Potter fans, so go ahead and check that out. But inspired by that, I found out that, Mike, you've never read Splinter of the Mind's Eye before, correct?
No, I read the comic book that I believe Terry
Right.
Austin did in the 90s, where they basically modified the story in order to make it work, with the entire trilogy in place already.
Right, they canonized it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
as
sort of.
terrible as that term is, completely out of place for that. But
It works.
let's just say it that way. So this is, for anybody who doesn't know, Splinter of the Mind's Eye was written as a sequel to Star Wars, based on the idea that if Star Wars flopped, which Lucas was pretty convinced it was going to. He thought it might do okay. And so he had Alan Dean Foster write a sequel to Star Wars using certain plot ideas, using certain stuff from things that Alan Dean Foster had been allowed to see because he, of course, ghost wrote the original Star Wars novelization. And the idea was this would be a low-budget way for Lucas to make a sequel to Star Wars, especially if it was, less than successful. A lot of Lucas's decision-making on that front was undoubtedly inspired by his frustration, which he has voiced numerous times to THX 1138, where he felt he had boxed himself in, and then the box office failure of it made it impossible for him ever to really return to that world again. He actually said in an interview that he had always wanted to explore the idea of going back to that world, but he felt that the story was done and it wasn't well received, so why bother? So we see him planning an escape route to continue Star Wars stories, because if a book is published and you can say it's based on a book, so much the better. I mean, he's essentially getting Alan Dean Foster to write his first story treatment for him, and it makes writing that much easier. So we have Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and we're here in the first chapter. All that we know up to this point, if we've never read it before, is that on the cover is a very beautiful, actually, painting of Darth Vader in shadow standing on what looks to be a chasm between Luke and Leia and himself, and a glowing red gem. And so we open it up, and Mike, where do we find ourselves in Chapter 1?
Well, Luke and Leia in separate ships. Luke is in an X-Wing and Leia is in a Y-Wing, along with 3PO. Luke's with R2. They are flying to a planet where the people on the planet are definitely sympathizing with the rebellion, but they haven't joined the alliance yet. And, they're at kind of a crucial stage, and there's like another planet which is going to basically join the alliance if these guys do. So Luke and Leia need to basically negotiate with the leaders of this planet to be like, hey, join our rebellion in order to get not one but two systems. But in the process, they run into some turbulence or whatever, and they both...
Leia's ship develops some convenient technical problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she crash lands on this planet, and Luke, in an attempt to, go after her, also crash lands on the planet. And at this point, the entire chapter is told from Luke's perspective, and it's really sort of about Luke after he crash lands on the planet, beginning his journey to find Leia, which is, kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. And if he's lucky, he'll find her in like a week, if he's going in the right direction, and if something in this sort of swampy, jungly place doesn't kill him first. So, that's
yeah. It's funny you mention that the system is Sercarpus. They're on the way to Sercarpus 4, and they wind up crash landing on Sercarpus 5, and the planet is also called Mimban. And you mentioned swampy. There was something rather familiar about the topography and the cloud layer around Mimban, wasn't there? It just seems a little familiar, doesn't it?
The entire crash sequence felt extremely like the crash sequence on Dagobah,
Yeah.
And I'm curious as to how exactly that all went down, because I've got to think that someone was influenced by someone. I mean, we've seen this before. Like, there's that memo, which I think we brought up on numerous occasions, where Lucas, Kasdan, and Spielberg are breaking the story for Raiders, and they come up with this whole sequence where Indy is in a plane, and the plane is, set to crash, and the pilots jump out of the plane with parachutes and leave him with no fuel. So he's got to grab a raft out of the back of this plane and use it to, slide down a mountain to safety. Like, you can read the entire inception of that scene when these three guys were breaking the story for Raiders. And obviously that's what was used at the beginning of Temple of Doom. So, obviously this is how these things work, right? I've got to think that either Lucas, I'm assuming Lucas maybe sat down with Foster at some point along the way and was like, here's the story, whatever. And either when they were breaking this novel or, after this novel was out, Lucas is like, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that in Empire. That's good visuals,
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that there's something even more likely is that Lucas had a bank of planets and planet names going into I mean, everybody knows the long, torturous process he took to write the script for Star Wars. Like, it was pure agony for him, and he just kept generating all of these ideas. So I'm sure that Mimban and Dagobah come from the same note somewhere along the way. And on top of that, it actually... where could you film it? Now, it's not exactly like Dagobah because there are open spaces. It's not the big closed canopy that we've seen on screen for Dagobah. It's almost like a melding of Kashyyyk and Dagobah because there are giant trees and expanses, and then there's the cloud layer, and then there's swampy parts, and so there's this mishmash of things. The first Mimbanite that Luke runs across is actually essentially an 8-legged creature, but 4 of the legs act as arms and 4 of the legs act as legs. And I can see in my mind, knowing this was written in 1978 with the idea of a low-budget film in place, Lucas thinking along the lines of what he originally envisioned for Jabba, of we'll do this with stop motion. Mm-hmm. We'll have a Ray Harryhausen type of effect in here. We'll figure it out by that point. Because that was the whole reason, Jabba got scrapped. They had this idea that they were going to, mat something over top, and they were going to figure out some way to do it. They couldn't figure it out. They couldn't make it look good. So they drop it. And so Lucas, as evidenced by some of the other things that he has brought back or revisited, very easily would have said, well, use this because this is something I couldn't use this time, and we'll figure it out by the time we get there. But, and at the same time, with it being low budget, you can easily see this as some piece of Earth that they would film it on, that they wouldn't need to go anywhere exotic.
Yeah. There is that Star Wars thing where it's like every planet is like some region of Earth, but no planet has like varying regions. It's like one is all forest. Oh, this one is all water. This one is all desert. So, it's just kind of carrying on that great tradition, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's what made Naboo so jarring in Episode 1 was, oh my gosh, more than one terrain on a planet. Mm-hmm. What's happened here? Yeah. So that's our first chapter. Luke has crash landed, and he's on his way to find Leia. And, I guess this is minor spoiler territory, but it's very clear that they had not... even in this first chapter, completely sold themselves on the idea of Luke and Leia being related.
Yeah.
Because Luke has him musing at one point that's a little uncomfortable if you're blood related. I'd say.
Which is there in the other... It's there in Episode 4 as well. It's there in Episode 5 even, So, they can still play around with that. And, what I find to be most interesting about this is, we just talked about, like, Rian Johnson picking up the torch from JJ Abrams, and now JJ Abrams picking up the torch from Rian Johnson and everything, and how there wasn't a plan, and how, each chapter is sort of like seat of your pants, filmmaking in terms of telling this trilogy. And in a lot of ways, I guess you could kind of say that this is what was going on here, Is this Episode 5, in a sense, in some alternate reality where instead of George Lucas continuing the story to completion, he hands it off to Alan Dean Foster to come up with something, and then maybe someone else comes up with an idea for Star Wars 3, which is completely unrelated? It's interesting to see what might have been if another writer takes what they see in Star Wars and develops their own sequel to that. And, I think that that's interesting, and it'll be really interesting to see how it manifests itself, throughout this.
I agree. And we look forward to continuing on this journey through Splinter the Mind's Eye with you. In the interim, Mike, where can people find you online?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K, and you can also find me on CommentaryTrackStars.com doing a show called Commentary Track Stars, and you can find me on Trek.fm doing a show called The Edge and another show called Stage 9 with you.
That's right, you do Stage 9 with me, where we look at the works and influences of Star Trek creators, and it's an exciting time with Star Trek Discovery coming up. And you can also find me right here on the network co-hosting Aggressive Negotiations with Matthew Rushing, which is a Star Wars show of a slightly different sort. And you can find me co-hosting Words with Nerds with my pal Craig. And if you want to interact with me online somewhere, just look for Kessel Junkie. That's who I am. So thanks for joining us for this part, and we look forward to seeing you next week on Great Shot, Kid.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.